Well, good evening, Craig. How are you, man?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great.
Did you know there's a storm brewing?
There is a storm brewing. It's been a beautiful day, but that's
Around
just the
here.
calm before the storm. We're recording this on Thursday, and Hurricane Florence is supposed to be around, I
Our
think,
home
starting
state,
tomorrow. Is it
our home
Friday?
state of North Carolina and South Carolina. I thought we should maybe do an audible and talk about storm anxiety and stuff like that and get it pushed out.
That's
But
a great idea.
because there's a lot of people that are anxious. So, hello everyone. I am Chris Gazdick, and Craig is our co-host. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast. We do invite you to see the world through the lens of a real mental health and substance abuse therapist, with the goal to create emotional growth through the medium of this podcast. Please do be aware it's not a delivery of a therapy service in any way, and feedback and discussion. Really, we're looking for it, guys, on either Facebook or the blog tab on throughatherapisteyes.com. Let's get talking. We don't want to talk just for a half an hour through the week. The human emotional experience. Craig, let's figure this thing out together.
Sounds like a plan to me, Chris. Before we get started, though, let's mention our sponsoring agency, Metrolina Psychotherapy Associates, a psychotherapy agency located in the metropolis of Belmont, North Carolina, serving children, adolescents, adults, and couples. Metrolina was founded on July 1st of 2010 by our own Chris Gazdick. They strive to work with you towards emotional growth. Check them out at metpsych.com and or call 704-461-8253.
DW was mentioned in a prior show. She was kind of taken aback by that.
Yeah, I love DW if you're listening.
Hi, DW. Oh, episode 6. So, suicidal and homicidal risk factors. Homicidal is a weird word. What we know and what we don't know. We've talked about mass murder events. We talked about the trauma with first responders, and we talked about mindfulness, right? I figured that was a good sandwich with a pretty hot topic that's really buzzing across our country. It seems like, every several months there's a new event and stuff that's going on. So we're going to try to be mindful in the moment as we talk about homicide. Is that possible?
I think it is. It should be.
Yeah. I think that one of the things I want to start off by saying and kind of explaining is that with risk of giving an air of doubt about the mental health profession and what we're able to do, we do know what to look for. We know how to assess things, and we know what we're kind of looking for. But I'm going to make a little bit of an argument and kind of help people understand that assessing homicidal risk, in just my experience as a therapist for a long time, is something that we're not really as used to doing, adept at doing, or really having needed to do nearly as much as we assess for suicidal risk. So I kind of feel like, this is just my opinion, really. It's not based on research and stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about research, but I'm not a research geek, and I don't want to make this a dry research kind of thing. So we're just going to talk about it with my background as being more of a clinician than a researcher. But we are much more comfortable, I feel like, and because we do it a lot more, talking about with clients, assessing with clients their suicidal risk factors and preventing that and managing that. I really don't think that we do as much homicidal factors in talking to people. It definitely comes up, don't get me wrong. It comes up and we deal with it, but there's a big slant that needs to change because of obviously the big and dramatic events that are kind of going on. So I'm going to say that we have professional understanding of both homicidal and suicidal risk factors, but it really leans towards assessing and understanding and acting on suicidal risk factors, not murdering events and such. I guess we'll open up, Craig. What are some of your thoughts about, just without knowing, the training and research side of it, from just your eyes as the intelligent person you are and a member of our society. I mean, what do you see? I mean, what do you look for just as a citizen to assess, hey, this person's a danger to other people?
I don't really have any experience with individuals like that. I guess some of the things you hear about in the media to look for, and maybe you can point those out better than I can off the top of my head. But I haven't really been around anyone in my life who I thought maybe at risk for doing something like that. I think obviously somebody who makes threats, who also possesses, a large number of weapons or something like that would be somebody that would concern me.
They got an armory?
Yeah, I do know people who are gun collectors, if you will, but
And they got an armory.
They seem like stable people to me.
Sure.
But I've never been fearful of anybody who I know personally who owns weapons, or thought that those people might commit some kind of mass murder.
What about suicide? People that are at their end of their rope. What are you thinking about looking for with people?
Yeah, for me, I guess without being an expert like yourself, I just would look for somebody who's depressed, who who maybe talks about taking their own life or something like that. That's what would kind of concern me. Outside of that, I don't know what I would look for.
They're depressed and feeling sad and talking about it. And
yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're going to be alarmed.
Right.
Has that happened much, honestly, in your circles over time? People that are really down? And
not really. I don't really. No one I know, no one that's been close to me has ever taken their own life. I've known, I think a kid in school when I was in junior high school, middle school now, took his life. And I've heard of people taking their lives, maybe friends of mine who knew people that but nobody in my direct circle has ever committed suicide.
And maybe we could take that as a little bit of a case in point on what I'm saying, though, because have you ever known anybody to commit murder or take somebody's life, or known anybody to know people?
I knew a guy who took somebody's life in self-defense, and he was brought to trial, and the jury found him innocent based on self-defense purposes.
I'm not sure. I'm just making the point that I think people are going to come across completing the act of suicide much more commonly than completing an act of homicide. I have no empirical data about that, but I'm thinking that's probably a true statement. And if that's so, that's the same that I'm seeing that clinicians in the mental health field kind of experience. Would you say that's a true statement?
I would think so. I mean, maybe. Suicide is obviously more prevalent, I think, than mass murders or
certainly the mass murders, but I'm just talking about murder too.
Murder in general, I don't know. You know, I think people are probably murdered on a daily basis, and we don't hear about that.
Mm-hmm. Be interesting to see some statistics on that.
Some statistics on that, but I have no idea.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of that, and a lot of my looking back on, what we're talking about. A lot of what we know from homicidal risk factors comes from domestic violence, really. And in a sense, domestic violence is what we look for more often and assess more often in homicidal concerns. So if you take that off the board, then the numbers, I would argue, probably are highly skewed towards suicidal folks than people that are really kind of killing out of any mass murder thing, which by definition is a lot smaller than a dramatic thing people might think about. So domestic violence is what we really kind of derive what we look for, to be honest with you, too, which I'm going to make the statement. I think that probably very much is a very different picture with school shootings or school stabbings or, you mentioned down in the beach area, the church stuff that happens. I mean, I think those are a very different perpetrator outlook than what we see in domestic violence. Mm-hmm. So one of the big, statements I'm going to make is, honestly, we need research dollars towards this. That's kind of what I'm really driving at. We really, as a field, need to study it. I mean, we need to study it and make it more of a more of a thought about, research, explored kind of a thing than what I think we currently do. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot out there. When I did look around, I see a lot of recent dates on studies that people have. I don't see a lot of old dates. In the last 10 years, it's become much more like, holy crap, we got to figure this out. Before that, it wasn't so, I'm not going to say it wasn't so thought of, but it wasn't so studied. It wasn't so assessed. It just comes up in our therapy offices, I think, a little bit more rare. then, of course, suicide.
Right.
By the way, nice little side note. I learned from a student and a colleague that I made the mistake of talking about suicide with successful suicide attempts. You hear people say that, oh man, it's terrible. My friend's friend successfully completed suicide. It's not a good way to refer to that.
Talk about suicide being a successful
endeavor.
Yeah,
it's something that's kind of a, it's a known mistake, but you do much better at kind of saying completed suicide for people that have had this in their lives, in their circles.
Right.
This is not obviously successful. Just a side note, but an important one. Research. I'm not going to make this a big research thing. Because that's something that we need to study and learn about in CEU trainings and schools of study for counselors and psychologists and stuff. But, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we think about in the circles and what we're looking for, we'll have a couple of notes and show notes to properly credit these folks. But, like I said, the study that I saw most recently, when did they do this? Over there in Cambridge University Press, supported these guys in the University of Montreal. Anyway, they did a research project, and in their summary, they talked about some factors that we look for and things that we've done. And they made them a statement that most of the research has been conducted in the United States, Canada, and Australia. But this is a worldwide thing really going on, probably more so in some other parts of the world even. Not being a stats guy, I can't back that up, but they pointed out that men definitely are more likely than women, to be perpetrators of particularly intimate partner homicide. Intimate partner homicide risk factors, they look for estrangement and jealousy as being major risk factors. An interesting piece that's different about suicidal things, a coercive control component, men with females. So being real coercive and being real controlling and being real over dominating. Again, some of the things you'd see in domestic violence is what these guys kind of pointed out. But I did think it was interesting that research, is done mostly around here on this stuff. Another component that I wanted to point out with this dry research stuff is, I think it was the CDC or this lady named Leanne Hoffman who does some writing, it seems like, kind of gave a real brief layout on, what we're looking for people that are of danger. And there's a scale, basically a real neat and dirty, cut and dry, quick little assessment. 1 is low risk, 5 is high risk, and they lay some different factors out here with it. Actually, some of what you kind of mentioned, some of it's really kind of common sense. Having a lethal plan, available means to do it, history of attempts or activity, being impulsive, feeling like a strong urge to control and get even with a significant other, specifically with DV. They mentioned substance abuse as a risk factor, and actually having combined suicidal risk factors. So like I said, we have some idea of all of this, and we look for it, and I think there are many instances that have been prevented, but I just don't feel like we're quite up to snuff in our thoughtfulness, mindfulness, if you will, to revisit that in the moment when we're dealing with, holy cow, I think I have a concern this person might hurt somebody. So that's that's some of the research pieces of it. And I think that's a public, and I think it's same in the public too. I mean, you think about more like suicide than you do homicide. That's, I don't know, listening to some of this, do you think that's a factor? You think that's true?
What's that?
That people think more about suicide than homicide in regular, everyday to day life.
Probably so. I would say so. And I just did a quick Google search as you were chatting there. I don't have numbers, but I did find an article on NPR that I'll post in the show notes here that says that suicides from guns make up nearly 2/3 of all gun deaths in the United States. And it does say that they overwhelmingly affect white men. So 2/3 of the gun deaths are suicides versus, I guess, 1/3 would be.
Yeah, that might support what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I think that suicide's a much bigger issue than
with guns.
Than homicide. I'm sorry, than homicide.
And probably with knives and other ways that people, because mass murder really is only like 5 people or more is the way I think it's qualified.
Yeah,
places. It's not the dramatic.
I was thinking it was three.
It might be 3. I wanted to say that.
But it might be 5 or more. I'm not sure about that.
This is definitely not a stats show.
No, it's definitely not.
But it's really talking about the day-to-day grind that we're dealing with, and this does need to be on our cultural awareness. Just like in airports and stuff, we have much more cultural awareness about screening things. I think that's what we're talking about. Can I use that as a metaphor? You go into an airport, used to be, you throw your bags around, you don't think anything of it. I actually made a joke. It was a terrible moment in an airport when I was younger, before all the stuff kind of kicked up about having a bomb in the bag, and the dude just looked at me like, dude, you can't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to college with a couple of guys from Boston. I went to Western Carolina, and they were classmates of mine, fraternity brothers, and they were flying back to Massachusetts for summer break or something like that. And this was way before 9/11, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And one of the guys jokingly told one of the security guards that his buddy had a bomb in his bag, and people came out of the woodwork, and these guys, were interrogated for 6 hours before they finally decided it was just a stupid joke and they weren't really a threat.
But see, the metaphor there is really, we now kind of know that. You just don't say that in airports or in media or mass transit stations and stuff. We kind of know that. I want to get us into a space where we kind of know, too, hey, I'm not afraid of mental health. More on that in a bit. I'm not afraid of mental health, but I see that there might be a risk here. I see that there might be a thing going on that we need to be aware of,
Yeah. Let me ask you this, man. I'm not sure. I guess majority of these folks, maybe some are, but aren't in therapy. But if I think you're a threat to harm yourself or somebody else, what action can I take on
There
that?
you go. Perfect segue. Did you do that on purpose?
No, I did not.
That's perfect. It's perfect because I'm curious, struggle with that for a second, Craig. Do you know what you would do? So you see this guy, he's made some statements, he's messing around with you, but he seems really serious, it seems kind of off, and you get more and more concerned, like, dude, I think that needs to be checked out. What would you do?
I guess you could report him to police or somebody like that, but I'm not sure what action they can take until he's actually communicated some kind of threat or actually done something that's specific. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, you're really pretty close on, and it is. It's a perfect segue into something I really wanted to talk about, the limitations that we have in the field when it comes to, okay, you've assessed that there's a risk and there's enough actionable items to go on. What happens? What do we do? And this is a qualifier here. This is a real problem that we have in the field, and it's an ethical issue, and it's a complicated legal issue, as well as probably moving on to a bit of a moral issue, which is a mess when you put all those things together.
Yeah.
It really is. Before I forget to mention it, I did want to say on the ethical front, too, we have something called tears-off. So clinicians know that when we feel like someone or a group of people is in danger, we have an ethical obligation called a duty to warn. And
I think that should go further than just therapist. I think everybody should have an ethical.
Interesting thing, and I don't know that it is.
Something out.
I don't know that it is.
I'm sure it's not, but I think it should be. Even if you're suspicious, at least in today's world, with all this crazy stuff happening.
And that's what we're talking about cultural awareness, Craig, because, we're going on a little tangent here, but that's okay, because school teachers or, police officers or pretty much any professional organization is going to say, if you suspect a child of being molested or neglected in any way, you have a duty to report that to the Department of Social Services. You have no question. Suicide, we also have an ethical obligation to break confidentiality, and generally I think professional disciplines kind of know that. Clergy,
Mm-hmm.
Homicidal, I don't think people think about much in other disciplines and stuff, and I can't answer you if there's an ethical obligation for a clergy to report that. I know there is for child abuse.
What about therapists? If you think I'm going to...
Yes, that's what I'm saying. For mental health professionals, we know that there is a duty to warn if we know somebody is imminently going to be hurt.
Got it.
We will have to call. We will have to notify you. Say I have an actionable threat. I just need to notify you.
What's the definition of an imminent? Is that like me specifically saying, "Hey, Chris, I'm going to go in here and do
Right.
this"?
I go back to the references earlier about what we kind of look for in the risk factors.
Yeah.
It's there. We know.
Is it a risk factor if I come into your office and I say, Chris, I've been thinking about going down to the, local library and committing heinous crimes? I mean,
it's an early risk factor.
Okay. So
I got to have
something you would report.
I got to have more information. I'm going to probe you more. I'm going to talk to you more. Do you have guns? Have you ever thought about doing this before? What's going on in your life?
But at what point does it become an ethical obligation for you to report it?
Now we're going to go through into ethics conference and discuss that for a few hours.
Okay.
Really. But I want to get back to what happens instead and spend our time there, because that is a major issue that I wanted to point out. When you go through the process of contacting the police, they're going to point you over to the magistrate. And what the magistrate's going to do is they're going to get information from you about what you know and what you've heard and what you're thinking. And they're going to make a decision, we need to assess this, and we're going to go involuntarily pick somebody up and bring them in for an assessment. So it's called an involuntary assessment. Every state has different names for that. In Florida, what was it called? Baker Act me. In Florida, it's called Baker Act.
Okay.
A lot of states have had legal cases where, you have to follow the law because it wasn't followed and risks weren't looked after, and we now are going to say you have to.
Yeah.
So it's also a very litigated thing and not really clear, and a lot of different states have different regulations for that. But most states, I know in West Virginia, when my very first job working in mental health or crisis hotline, we would go out mobily to people's homes and facilitate this process. In West Virginia, it was a little different than here. We would have an actual mental hygiene commissioner that would, be on call. We got a crisis call at 11 o'clock at night, and we're going to come to your house. We're going to talk to you. We call the mental hygiene commissioner. He comes out. There's different processes in different states, but it's actually a legal action that is determined. In this state, the legal action is determined after you're in the hospital, I believe.
Right.
But what we're doing is we are taking your civil liberties away. This is why it's a serious deal. And we're saying you can't be anywhere but in our custody.
Yeah.
For a short period of time, 24 hours, sometimes probably 36 hours or stuff. And we're going to assess you in a facility, in a hospital, or an emergency room.
So do you, in that kind of situation, does the therapist go out to the person's house, or does it law enforcement, they bring them back to the hospital? How does that whole thing
Different
look?
states do it differently, but different states do it differently. Mobile crisis teams will do that,
Yeah.
But you file with a magistrate in any jurisdiction, essentially, they're going to have the process to go through and do it. So that's what bottom line that you need to know.
I was just thinking, if I think somebody's homicidal, I'm not going to knock on their door at midnight and say, hey,
Right.
buddy, we need to have a chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're bringing the police, and they're going to take him into custody if the magistrate determines, or in West Virginia, the mental hygiene commissioner determines there's a risk and a concern. But so then play that out for a little bit. What happens is they get into a facility and they get assessed. And that's great. And this is all very strong, and we do it well, and we know what we're doing. And, we may begin medication. We may not. We have you in a facility. But for how long? You've taken their civil liberties away, and you put them in a facility. People like to think it's real easy. Oh, this person's a risk. Well, take them away, lock them up, keep them there. They're a menace to society. They're scary. I'm concerned. No, they're a person. They're a person, and they need treated, and they do get treated, but it is short term, particularly if they're not voluntary. So we stabilize. They say, okay, mea culpa. Shouldn't have said that. That was stupid. Guys, I ain't gonna do anything. And we say, well, okay, don't. Okay. Safety is achieved. But with somebody that has, and we'll talk about different things like bipolar or, schizophrenia or, different conditions, or just a really rough marital life over a period of a year, and they go in and out of trouble. They go in and out of depression. People that have strained relationships with teachers, whatever, tough social experiences, bullying and being picked on. They're going to go in and out of that over a long period of time, and that's the thing that we're really concerned about. We can deal with short-term stability. Safety comes first, but after you're safe, we can't just keep people.
Yeah.
It's not ethical. It's
Yeah.
not reasonable. It's not moral. It's not legal.
Right. So let me ask you this. Now, every time there's a school shooting, the left says it's a gun issue and the right says it's a mental health issue. Has treatment of mental health changed over the last couple of decades? Because if you think about it, Chris, I don't remember any school shooting before 99, I think, and that's when Columbine happened. I never dreamed of anybody bringing a gun to school.
Yeah.
And now these things are common occurrences. And people are saying it's a mental health issue, which I think we could dive way into that, about some theories about what's going on there. But something has shifted over time. Is it lack of mental health treatment today versus 20 or 30 years ago that's spurring these events? I mean,
I don't necessarily think it's a lack of treatment, though. We need that. That is, I think, obviously, I'm probably a little bit biased in doing it in the field. We need that as a major highlight. I talked with some persons that knew statistics that were doing trainings about safety and whatnot, and they kind of would somewhat make the argument that really mass murder events have been going on for a long time. We have semi-automatic rifles now, we have bombs, we have a lot of different things that could do a lot more damage, which causes more of the dramatic events. But going back to whatever he was talking about more intelligently, 1823 and whatever in the school, little school prairie on the hill, the dude would bring a knife and kill 4 people. I mean, that would happen regularly.
Yeah.
So the numbers and the statistics, people can get a little bit skewed with the dramatic aspects of a semi-automatic rifle unthinkably in a school.
Yeah.
We can do that now because of technology, but we could do that years ago with swords and stuff too.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more that we need to know about that.
I'm not saying there's a gun issue at all. I think that
Right.
there's
I know
other things going on, and I think banning guns is not going to stop mass murders and crimes. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that it seems like now, and maybe it's 24/7 news channels looking for the next big thing
That's
to
a
jump
part of
onto,
it.
or whatever the deal is. But I just don't remember mass murder being an issue, until fairly recently in the grand scheme of things.
And I'm suggesting that it was.
Okay, well,
I'm suggesting that it was, and that's a little thing that we miss, because of the 24-hour news cycles, and again the bigger events. I mean, when you hear the numbers that Columbine was the first major event where so many people were killed, that's probably true. Because what were you going to do back in the day with your 6-shooter?
Yeah,
you take a couple shots and somebody takes you out with a punch.
Right.
Now you take a couple shots with a semi-automatic rifle, and that's a bigger concern.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, I'm glad you brought gun control. You can't not talk about gun control when you have this topic of homicidal risk factors on the table. I really want to highlight a concern that I have as a passionate mental health professional, making my life's work around these issues. And I can use this platform to make the point that we really need to avoid fear influencing our decisions. We need to be logical thinking. We need to be research oriented. I'm saying research dollars. I'm saying we need to study this stuff. We need to be thoughtful about what we're doing, not acting out of fear, particularly after an event that happens. Because I see a big fat danger of really discriminating against all of us, actually. Because when we're talking about mental health, we all have a breaking point. We can't be discriminating against a diagnosis. We can't be discriminating against mental health. We can't be further driving, myths and misconceptions about this whole field that we've got going on. And I see a great danger in that. So I'm just kind of warning us about that. We have to be careful to understand people do need treatment, but we don't need to be, just because you see a therapist, you can't have a gun, or crazy things like that. And I've heard people suggesting stuff like that.
Yeah, I think
nuts.
that's ridiculous. I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment.
Yes.
I do think that there could be some things. I'm not going to get into that on this particular show tonight, at least. But maybe there are some Second Amendment limitations, if you will.
Yeah.
And again, I hope I don't get any hate mail for
I
saying
know, right?
that.
Well, as long as we're being thoughtful about it and balanced in the
right.
way that we're trying as a society to deal with these issues.
Yeah, and I don't think taking guns is going to stop people from doing heinous acts.
Yeah.
People in foreign countries are strapping bombs to themselves and blowing themselves up in marketplaces, and So there, where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly. Yeah. I will say the one suggestion I will put out there as a proponent, we do have people already in place. People are worried about, hey, we're going to spend all these dollars, these public dollars on mental health people in schools and this type of thing. Look, we've already got a lot of things in place that probably aren't really being used appropriately.
Absolutely. I'm not a big news watcher just because of the, I think it's a bunch of fear-based things in a lot of ways. But I did hear that the kid in Parkland had like 39 instances of saying he was going to do things, and the FBI, he was on the FBI list or whatever, and nothing was done, and he ended up carrying out his act.
And I don't know about prior cases and specifics with that. We could probably go into detail and talk for hours about it, but I would say what I was saying before about the involuntary commitment process. He might have been cleared and safe 39 times.
Could have,
I don't know. And there's people that have been.
You think after 39 times, somebody would have said, "Hey, this guy's not stable."
I'm saying in not that particular instances, but in 39 times, somebody may have been in the hospital and 39 times been able to be safe at the end of that hospitalization. What do you do then? Do you keep him in a hospital for a decade?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's part of the...
Those are tricky things.
That's what I was talking about before. We need to be aware of the public being aware of the ethical and the moral and the legal, intersection here.
Yeah.
With a complicated mess of, So, but the things that we already have in place can work if clinicians in schools and social workers in schools are used properly, where we have more of an awareness about, hey, we just need you to take a look out on this guy.
Yeah.
Instead of pushing some paper or doing some of this stuff with assessments and different things that they really, really get bogged down on, and I can tell you that that's the case with a lot of clinicians already in place. They ain't doing clinician work. They're doing, paperwork and stuff.
Yeah.
Let's let them have a cultural awareness of looking at people.
Yeah.
Because you can really rule a lot of people out that aren't at risk.
Yeah, true, very true.
You can rule, this kid's not a concern. I could say that as a clinician.
Yeah.
This one is a little bit more alarming to me based on my science knowledge on mental health.
Yeah.
That we need to let them do that.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of evaluation process to figure these things out, because I think people are so afraid these days that they err on the side of caution, and then, I don't think there's a real way to identify who's a threat and who's not, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, we just, again, the main purpose here today was I hope some of the research stuff, hope wasn't too dry, but want to increase cultural awareness about it so that people can be more not fearful, but logical and balanced in the way that we're trying to deal with a really serious issue on homicidal risk factors.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of sum up the show, Chris. What are some takeaways and things that our listeners might take away from today's, just in summary?
Yeah, wow. I don't know. Rely on mental health professionals. Understand the limits with the systems that we currently have in place for long-term safety versus short-term safety. Let's use some people that are in place for current services in schools and EAP agencies and different things along those lines. Hey, my son texted me. Sorry about that. Cool ringtone, though, right?
It is nice.
One, Metallica. But I think the biggest thing, Craig, that I would maybe think of as a takeaway is I don't want people to be fearful of this. We do have treatments. We have prevented thousands and tens of scores of thousands of different events and stuff that will never make it on 24-hour news cycles. So there's a lot that's working. I'm a real optimistic, hopeful person. I don't want people to be fearful.
Yeah.
I want us to be thoughtful.
Yeah. It's really too bad you don't hear about the preventions, because that might encourage somebody to take action if they think something's going on, But that's not the world we live in, man. That doesn't get advertising dollars on CNN and Fox News.
Right. Moral courage is a concept there that maybe we'll talk about next time. I kind of screwed up, guys. I usually like to have my next show in mind, and I need to think about it, what we're going to do. So instead, I'm going to wrap up by saying I think we're going to start getting into some issues with substance abuse. We haven't done anything with substance abuse yet, and it kind of fits with this topic of homicidal ideation. It is a risk factor. So we're going to have a guest speaker about that, I think. I'll leave his identity a mystery for a cliffhanger. He's a local celebrity, I guess we can call him. But he has at least verbally agreed to it. We just got to firm it up. Take us out of here.
Okay, so we are live on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, most of your podcast channels. If you guys are enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. You can find our show notes for each show on throughwiththerapisteyes.com, and you can also find links to our social media there. Yeah, I think that about wraps us up.
We've got a little bit of education that gone out today on Facebook, I think. I've been screaming for it. I think a lot of people do not know how to access it, so we got it on our Facebook page. If you stumble upon this show in some weird sort of way, I've heard you say subscribe. I really didn't even know what subscribe meant to a podcast.
Yeah, Norm, there's a button on this on the app or whatever.
I know I'm going to look stupid doing that.
And leave a review.
Well, podcast. And I
guess the irony of what you're saying, Chris, is there's an article on our website about how to listen to a podcast.
There is.
So if you're listening, you know how to listen. You know how to listen.
There is now. Thanks, Craig. Man, have a good week. And it's probably over, and people know what's going on. But I really want to keep awareness for the people over in the east coast of South Carolina and North Carolina with the storm. Everyone be safe, or hope you were safe by the time you hear this episode. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris.